time today. Thanks for watching. Appreciate that. Hello, everybody. All right, so I'm just going to kind of pick it up where I left off yesterday. Yesterday, how to draw chests, I think. So, talking about doing anatomy in perspective. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Oh, my earbuds are going to die. Silly me. Yeah, right now they're like ticking down.
Just forget about this. I didn't charge my AirPods, so you're gonna have to deal with spotty audio. But I'm just gonna do some drawings and kind of keep it quiet. So thanks for tuning in. I'm also gonna make a Red Rooster update through Indiegogo soon, like today or tomorrow. I've got some people asking. You know, I've been sort of updating everybody, you know, verbally on the channel, on Instagram and on Twitter, but not everybody's on those platforms, and good for them. So I'm going to send out a big update on Red Rooster, and then I'm going to get through with this and get back to inking pages, which is going well. Thank you. Aaron Alfetch. That's probably the correct pronunciation. Hello, Mitch. Having troubles on how much detail to put to establish depth and focus. Hopefully the next session you can get to that. Thank you. So how much detail to put in a panel, I guess, to establish depth and focus. Just a brief, I'll do the real brief on that since you asked me right up front. Foreground. Midground. And of course, a background. 1, 2, 3. You kind of need all three of these things, and you can use illusion to accomplish this. I think we talked about this on the first string with the layouts, where I had a panel full of background and midground, but it's set beneath two panels that sat on top of it, and it kind of like went, this was a full bleed, so it felt like it was, these were the foreground images. A little trick. That's the first thing you should think about doing, and then you can. The answer is as little detail as possible to convince your reader that they're still in the environment that you're trying to sell them, right? I mean, that's how you accomplish that is, you know, up to you. There's like a million ways to do that. So you can draw one super detailed panel on panel 1, page 1, and then for 3 sequences have no backgrounds. I think that's a bit of a cheat, but so long as I think you try to put a foreground, middle ground, and background in each panel, and then you've sold this on a scene, I think you can get by with more scant details. All right, everybody's asking questions, so that's good. That gives me more stuff to talk about, more of these shows to do. Hope you're doing well. I am doing well, thank you. Jesse Miller's not worried about it. Thank you, Jesse. I'm only mildly worried about it, so I'll worry for you. Douglas says, I didn't see any updates on Instagram for some reason. I follow you in the Red Rooster account on Instagram. So I haven't pushed any through the Red Rooster account. That account's kind of been asleep since the campaign ended, although that may not stay that way. But yeah, I'm updating people with some images from the layouts and now from the inking pages without spoilers in it. So I'll show you what doesn't spoil the book. So it's on there on my Instagram at mbreitweiser, BreitWeiser. So appreciate that. Thanks for following. What's inside the best chest? Oh, somebody, all your dreams will come true. Jesse Miller says, I know you want to do the future, so you can't do that, and so you already finished Red Rooster. Well, no, I'm working on it. You know, he says, Technics, you put into a perpetual motion machine of sorts. I don't know, I wish I had some kind of really cool, neat machine. Or I could duplicate myself. That would be nice. Okay, anyway, I appreciate you guys for showing up. Hope this first little question got answered appropriately. Again, I wish I left the Spidey picture up, but it was foreground of the building. Consider that mostly black. It was Spidey. Swinging, and in the background were buildings. So foreground, middle ground, and background. And you'll have to convince, obviously the line weight's incorrect here. So you can convince someone that this is more of a background. These objects recede. Use a thinner pen or a lighter brush stroke or whatever, thinner line weights. And those will recede. Thicker line weights here, more blacks. And then medium line weights here in the middle, and then you should be able to sell that pretty well. I hope that helps. That's just a brief thing. So, we're gonna do some anatomy stuff. All right. There's a vanishing point. So yesterday we kind of did this with heads, but I talked more about the perspective. But I think you guys are starting to get it. All these points should recede somewhere. I'm not being super technical, but they'll all come together here. Another vanishing point below my horizon line somewhere way down here. So far, not what I had in mind. He came here for chest and the best chest. So, you know, clickbait. You got suckered. What can I say? Keep mixing my marker colors, and my markers are dirty. Let's do it in red. Red's good. You know what? Let's make this. All right, so I'm gonna try not to block the camera, but I gotta get a better angle here. What's with all the arm motions? I'm finding my edges. So that's kind of the first thing I do. I think about, oh, what's the bounding area of this shape? And because I like to draw from my shoulder, which is, you know, where you're supposed to draw, my arm tends to just drift as my brain sort of calculates where everything's supposed to go. You know, there are rules to this that I'm following, so I've got some tricks and whatever, but you know, ultimately, you've got some draftsmen that can just be like, we'll just crank it out, but they probably have a lot more horsepower than I do. So I know the tricks, and I have some design talent, and I can draw well enough, but mileage may vary. All right, so I found my center line for the character. Like so, makes sense. Another thing you could do, just to kind of keep everything in check, you're looking down on this character. Clearly the plane here is facing up, you can see it. So you could think about this, think about this like with ellipses. It's another way to think about depth and perspective. Sorry, I knocked the camera. So all of these elliptical shapes will sort of follow your guides that you set out here in perspective, which is, you know, the bounding, the penultimate bounding, or not the penultimate, that's the next, it's the ultimate bounding area. We've defined space here. So we gave space a predetermined value, or it's a known entity here because we created it, and so everything will sort of hang off of it like clothes off of a hanger. So once you've determined this set of values, everything has to work within this reality that you've constructed. So ellipses work in that reality, as you see here. Other boxes work within this space that we've created, and as do human figures, and human figures are squares and ellipses. Okay. All right. Everybody's following along. Then I'll do a male torso in a different perspective. And someone wrote me yesterday, I think in the comments section, and I'm not calling anybody out, but somebody said, "Oh, great, perspective, my least favorite part of drawing." Well, perspective is drawing in my mind. You have to sort of wrap your mind around this because you, all of your figures, all of your elements, all of your construction, all your design, if you want to convince someone that they're in a scene, a reader, that they are in an environment that you've created for them, and make it convincingly enough, it all has to exist in perspective. So these are conscious decisions that one has to make. You know, you got to place the camera somewhere. You have to point the reader in a particular direction. They have to know where they're at. Objects have to feel like they're not floating. And you can't crop everything off at the knees or ankles. So, who needs a 3D editor when you have Mitch? So, you are the 3D program. You are the 3D program. That is the thing you have to kind of get around. And I don't think it's a bad thing to spend some time in a 3D application. Just fiddling around and trying to help get your mind around that, because that's what you have to become, right? So, all right, I'm just gonna scan this for questions, and then I'll do one more, and I gotta get on with my day. I gotta crank out some ink, sling some ink. Okay. Move the camera up here. All right. Mustard Tiger always has great questions. Have you experimented with Riley's figure abstraction? No, I don't know what that is. Another thing for me to Google. Which programs have I used? I've tinkered around in Poser, like, I don't know. That was probably like 10 or 15 years ago. I downloaded a newer version like 5 years ago, and it was terrible. I couldn't even use it, so I don't know what software to recommend. I just draw it. Jesse Miller has trouble drawing a turned face, like random angles of the turned head. Okay. Well, we did two figures in perspective. Right there and there. That was fun. We can do some turned faces. Turned face. I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but let's do. Let's try two turned faces. Let's see if we can answer your question. So turn looking backwards, or from behind. And then this is looking up. So if the head is kind of turned at this, I don't know what you call this, three-quarter angle, one thing I recommend is, there's more, you have more skin. There's more skin. Skin is a light absorber, absorbs light. So since most of the plane of the face is here, this is the largest plane of the face, it's a little easier to think of the light coming this way, and then this light catching skin, which is more turned further to the background here, will catch more of the light, create more shadows, or at least there are more complicated shapes and stuff here because it's so turned and so tiny. So I put a little more, I put more black in there to give it weight on this side to make the skin look like it's catching more of that diffused light that it catches. Anyway, you guys can see those. I hope that helps. This is just kind of a putt-putting around broadcast today, so. Head as a box, yeah, so you may check out George Bridgman. So I like Bridgman and Loomis kind of together. Those are sort of the two ways I learned to do anatomy drawing, and then life drawing, of course. But Bridgman thinks of the human anatomy like a machine, which I think is really handy. Let's correct these legs while we're at it, and then I'll end this. His hands were way too big. Again, with the skin and the diffusing and everything, things get smaller as they recede down into perspective. Thus, things like fabric and skin are going to catch more light. So to, emphasize that, there's more of a line weight down here. There's drop shadow here under the knee, between the toes or whatever. In this back leg that's receded more, it's a little thicker line weight. Thus convincing, hopefully, the reader that there is depth in this object here. Okay, that was fun. I'm going to scan your questions. If you have any, shoot them out now. Subsurface scattering, that's the word. The light that scatters through partially translucent surfaces like skin, fabric, and that kind of stuff. That's the technical term that I couldn't think of. Thank you, whoever said that. Merc Does Gaming asks, what is the best way to constrain panels to a page, the size you intend to print or digitally after drawing it larger on paper? I'm not sure I understand your question. I say that a lot. Like I said, I don't claim to have all the horsepower. I just know a few tricks. Best way to constrain panels to a page, the size you intend to print or digitally after drawing it larger on paper. Okay, so I will say that I did all my layouts comic book size, or most of them. Most of them I did comic book size because I want to do the layout from the reader's perspective, because everything is reader focused. So I did the layouts comic book size, and that helps me kind of determine in advance, like what size will the character be in this panel, like when the reader sees it, and will it be legible, right? Is it all clear in this size? So I do that first, and then blow them up and ink it all full size, which is what I'm about to get to. So I appreciate the question. Mustard Tiger says that Futurist concept art looks super fun. Any backstory on the process? Was it mostly done in Procreate? Most of the Futurist concept art was either done in my sketchbook, and the digital ones were done exclusively in Photoshop. I appreciate that, and I will be talking more about that book when the time is right, so probably after Christmas, after the holidays. Okay, Merck clarifies, when setting up my panels, is it best to draw them to scale or scale them down digitally? Well, I think I just answered that. When I'm doing layouts, I draw them comic book size. Okay, good, I did answer it. I don't think there's anything wrong with drawing your stuff large and then scaling it down digitally. I think that would be a fine approach. I like drawing large because for me it's really important to draw from your shoulder. You get a more expressive stroke. You can see it all comes from here. All from the shoulder. You keep your wrist and your fingers kind of locked. So, so that I think that speaks to drawing larger and then shrinking down later. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just have to think about what the reader is going to see, and then I try to be loose on the larger drawings. Okay. Can you draw the same man as young, then adult, then old? I guess I could. I could. But it's time to get to work. So thank you all. See you next time. Bye-bye.